So that's it. Yeah, we're live. We're live right now. Okay.
Hey.
Beautiful.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Professional Novice with Ali A. Rizvi, and my name is Ali Rizvi. And I'm here today to talk about the Delta wave. So the Delta variant for COVID, is it a health scare or is it hysteria? And we're going to hear both points of view. But actually, there's probably more than just 2 points of view. So thanks to this Delta variant near the end of July, there's a fourth surge of COVID-19 that's upon us. The CDC has started recommending indoor masks, even for fully vaccinated people. Even if you're fully vaccinated, even though they're generally safe themselves, and for the most part, they can still. Initially, one study showed that they can accumulate large quantities of the virus in their airways and potentially transmit it to the unvaccinated. But then there were other studies that came out. Recent data shows that these the levels of the virus in these airways, they drop almost as fast as they build in the vaccinated, because, well, you've got this whole army of antibodies there waiting to fight it. So it drops pretty fast. But the R naught of Delta, where that's a measure of how transmissible it is estimated at between 6 and 9, whereas the R naught of the original coronavirus is about 2 to 3. Right. So this has implications for whether herd immunity can be achieved. I mean, apparently you'd need 90% of the population to be vaccinated with an R naught of 6 through 9, or like 7 or 8. You would need 90% of the population to be vaccinated in order to get herd immunity. Right. So even with the current vaccines and current vaccine rate and their efficacy, it would technically not be possible if the Delta variant became the main variant. So now, huh?
I said, which it is now.
Yeah, which it is. So now, the question is, what's going to happen here? Is this pandemic over? Are we in this for the long haul, or are we going to have more lockdowns and more issues, or not? Right. So who do we have here? First, we have you guys. Many of you who've been following this know Mookie Spitz. All right. My friend Mookie Spitz, who is a lot of things, including a medical strategist. He's a medical communications professional and a medical strategist. He's also a sci-fi writer. And his claim to fame, right, is that he, I'm going to say this, were Cassandra of COVID, because you predicted the U.S. You predicted the U.S. body count. This was last year, early on, before all this stuff was going to happen. He predicted the U.S. body count within a few points of the standard deviation. Okay, you wrote this while being unfriended by nearly half of his social media following along the way. A lot of people abandoned him because he was scaremongering. He was that guy on the corner of the street just screaming, just doom. And
yeah, so I bought the fridge and the toilet paper in February. So, we were ready for this.
He was the guy.
Delivered a lot of bad news no one wanted to hear. So
yeah. So that's what happened. So Spitz had it right. It turned out, that he was onto something. So yeah, that's Spitz. And then we have Ken. Ken, this is the first time you've been on this. So welcome.
Correct.
Happy to have you here. And
thank you very much.
Yeah. Ken's a really smart filmmaker. He is a curriculum developer. He's an assistant professor of digital media. He has been following this COVID stuff really, really closely as well. And he seems to have some differences of opinion from Spitz. So I'm going to start right first. The Spitz, I'll start with you. The first question is this pandemic over? Is it over? Spitz.
Yeah, for 190 million vaccinated Americans, it's more or less done. Go forward, live your life, wear a mask if it makes you feel more comfortable, go to shows, go to work, engage with your loved ones, your family, the economy. We're over the hump, and we could pretty much act with impunity and immunity. So it's split into two. The vaccines are safe. They're effective. The rate of breakthrough infection is about 0.08%. And of these, an infinitesimally small amount of folks are experiencing serious illness, hospitalization, and even fewer death. So is there still a public health situation? There certainly is. But it's like night and day compared to only a few months ago, within recent memory, when the vaccines weren't available yet. We were all vulnerable and we were teetering on the edge of uncertainty with a collapsing economy. So in a nutshell, retaining a sense of perspective, hopefulness, and optimism, the pandemic, for the most part, statistically, I will say is over. Let's move forward and go for it.
Okay, so yeah, one thing you said about the breakthrough infections, the range is around 0.1 to 0.29, 0.02 to 0.29%. 0.29% of 190 million is it's around 500,000 people. So you will see this illusion, like 190 people were vaccinated. So you're going to see this illusion of, wow, a lot of people getting these breakthrough infections, but the percentage is still very, very low. It's way
still very low. And I will also add that there have been recent studies that indicate that breakthrough infections often act as a kind of booster shot in and of themselves. So continued exposure to the variations of the coronavirus actually has a halo effect of some benefit in terms of circulating the virus within the population and, in a sense, reminding our immune systems of this danger.
Got it.
The vaccines work on all the variants, including the Delta, and we can talk more about the differences between Alpha and Delta in any kind of capacity. But once again, it breaks down to statistics. Is there risk? Is there suffering? Is there death? Unfortunately, there is. Okay. But you need to view this pandemic within the continuum of how it began, how it peaked, and where we are currently along the trajectory of the vaccines being available, society becoming active again and re-engaged. And at the same time, the consequences of lockdowns, panic, hysteria in terms of the ancillary effects of economic crisis, unemployment, suicide, and general human despair. So I'm trying to look at this from a broader, holistic perspective. I'm remaining aspirational and positive about where we've been and where we can get to. And Ken did an astonishing job of alerting everyone early that the variant was headed our way and that this would be problematic. I was the guy on the sideline usually freaking out that we're screwed with this COVID situation. And I flipped. I said, Ken, calm down. The variant is coming. We're going to have problems. But in the bigger picture, the vaccines are safe and they work. And until I hear otherwise, or there's data to substantiate that they're vaccine resistant, let's go for it. Let's be positive. And we can talk also about the role of government, mandates, implications, which we'll get into that's my essential position.
But I got to bring Ken into this. Ken, this is the first time you're on here. And so Spitz just said a whole bunch of stuff. What do you think? Is the pandemic over? Are the vaccines working?
Okay, so that's a compound question. So let me take the first question first. Is the pandemic over? That one is no. It's not over yet. It could be, but it's not. And there's a few things that make me say that. And just for some context, too, I was one of the early, Cassandra whistleblowers on this too. I started following the data when it first broke in China. And then once Italy shut down, I said, oh no, I better start prepping. And just like Spitz, I went out and I bought 2 months worth of food and bottled water and supplies because it was inevitable that it was going to come here. And that's the lens that I'm looking at this through now. And here's some of the reasons why I say it's not over, because I'm looking at what's happening now with the same eyes I looked at it with then. So first of all, there's a big segment of our population who is unvaccinated. Some of them by choice, 30-40% maybe even, who don't want to take the vaccine and are resisting it. Okay. There is a small percentage of our population who is immunocompromised or has some other sickness or whatever where they can't take the vaccine. And then we've got children under 12 who right now can't take the vaccine. And they are a big reason we can't just say that the pandemic is over, because school has started and it's starting up in other places now. And we're seeing from a lot of the states with COVID denying governors and that kind of stuff. They started school, and I believe it was in Mississippi, in 24 hours, 1,000 infected children in 24 hours of school starting. Now, the reason that in and of itself is going to be a problem is that we're already seeing higher than expected vaccine breakthrough, and it's projected to get worse. Okay, so from what the stats that I looked up here, Moderna currently is 76% effective against the Delta variant. Pfizer, 42% effective against the Delta variant. And there is an immunologist that I follow, and she is predicting that this virus is going to mutate into a 100% vaccine breakthrough variant. And if that happens, we're at square one again.
I agree with that.
They're going to have to, right. Yeah. They're going to have to tweak the vaccines, and we're all going to have to get jabbed again to keep up with this thing. Okay, so part of the reason that it's not over is because of the significant portion of our population who, for whatever reason, isn't getting the vaccine and allowing the thing to mutate. If everybody would go out tomorrow and get vaccinated, we'd get on top of this fairly quickly. But that's part of my point, though.
That's part of my point, which we could also talk about.
Okay, and the last thing that I'll say in this intro statement is that the death rate isn't the only adverse effect that you need to look at. Okay, so there is a higher than that less than 1% rate of hospitalization with breakthrough, and you don't want to have to go to the hospital either. One, because it's a horrible thing to have to be hospitalized for a disease. Two, the economic impact, because people are coming out with hospital bills in the thousands, hundreds of thousands, upwards of $1 million when they do get sick and go to the hospital. And finally, I work at a school, okay? And if people start to pop positive, even if it's mild cases of COVID, that's going to have an impact, right? Because people are going to have to isolate, they're going to have to quarantine. Some people are going to get sick enough that they can't come to work or they can't come to school. And when that happens, if it's bad enough, the school's not going to be able to function. They're gonna have no choice but to shut down. And even if the college that I teach at doesn't end up with a big problem with COVID, which I think that it will, anybody who has kids younger than 12, if it goes in LA like it's gone in those states where children are getting infected at a high rate, those people, when their kids get sick, aren't going to be able to come to work, at least not in person, because they're going to be home with their kids. And so until we get on top of those things and figure out what we're going to do about it, this is not over.
We lost the moderator. All right.
He's on mute.
He's on mute. Allow me to retort.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. This thing keeps on kicking I've got this new Samsung mic thing, and it just keeps on kicking it off. But yes. So yeah, I was going to ask Spitz to retort, but I wanted to I wanted to get your response actually specifically, to everything, but specifically to what Ken said about the children. I mean, this is true. Like, kids are not being vaccinated. They can't be vaccinated yet.
It's projected that kids, I think it's 5 to 12, might get approved for emergency authorization in September, and kids younger than that in October.
Right.
That's what I heard that they're trying.
It's coming, folks. It's coming.
Yeah.
The other thing is, vaccines aren't the only way to mitigate spread. So we could talk about masking. We could talk about other preventative measures to protect our children in lieu of the vaccinations being available.
Right. So that's what we did with all of us before the vaccines were available to us.
That's part of my point here. And all of this dovetails back into the notion of individual choice, the implications of that, and the realization that behavioral change for one reason or another is slow and in areas non-existent with regard to vaccine adoption and taking public health measures, which the three of us would consider obvious and necessary.
Right.
So there's a combination here of an ideal reaction to what's going on and the reality of what's going on throughout the country and the variability of that attitude and response. Absolutely. And when I say something hyperbolic like the pandemic being over, what I'm essentially saying is that you have the personal ability right now to protect yourself and your family. We did not have that before the vaccines were available. It's an absolute game changer. And that influences a lot of my argument, which is, if I'm taking a slightly libertarian or Darwinian point of view, then it's intentional. I think we need to move forward as a society. I think the data indicates that we have the tools at our disposal to protect ourselves and our loved ones. There are implications generally and publicly for people being irresponsible. It is a global public health crisis, but the situation has changed and we need to continue to move forward as a society and let it roll.
Absolutely. Right. So it has changed, but it's still not ended is my point. And I think it's a dangerous proposition to act as if it's ended before it's ended. Because I go further than I think even most people do with this. And it has to do with something that you just said. This is a global pandemic. Not only do we need to get our own house in order, but we need to do everything we can to get everybody else's house in order too. If there are countries that can't afford or can't roll the vaccine out fast enough, we have to do whatever we need to do.
But Ken, we are the number one distributor of vaccines throughout the world by orders of magnitude.
Absolutely. And I think we can even do more. I'm one of the people that says, we threw away last week, like 1 million doses of vaccine because they spoiled because Americans aren't taking them. We should have some sort of program that before that expiration date hits, we get them into the arms of foreign nationals that can use them if Americans won't take them. Because unless it stops in the whole world, we're not going to be safe. If it's still replicating in South America, it's still replicating in Africa, it's just going to mutate again and jump back to America in a vaccine-resistant form.
There's 7 times the cases of COVID that are outside the U.S. than inside the U.S. And at that rate, it's much more likely that the next mutation will happen on foreign soil and come here, just like the Delta did. But can we be laser focused for this conversation around the way that we should act individually as a country to mitigate some of the problems that you mentioned and shift part of this conversation into the area of what can and should be done to ultimately eliminate this problem?
That holistic view, like the holistic picture and looking at everything, like including all the other things that you mentioned. But before we go on to that, Ken, you were talking about the global thing. I have a question here. That there are different vaccines globally too, and they're not all great. Yeah. So
Sputnik,
whoever it is, they're asking this question: if I've got 2 doses of Sinovac, the Chinese vaccine, is it safe? Is one of them, along with Sinopharm. is it safe to go outside without a mask? The Sinovac has an efficacy of around 51%, but so far it seems like it's 100% effective at preventing hospitalizations and death, which pretty much all the vaccines are nearly 100%. Like there have been some deaths now, but again, they're a very tiny subset already of that 0.02% of vaccinated people who get breakthrough infections. So,
but it's a Chinese vaccine. So what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
What are we going to do about it?
Well,
yeah,
everybody in Pakistan
it applies here, right? But the thing is, if they ask that same question about COVID or Moderna or J&J, we'd still have a response to it, right? And as a general rule, yes, if you're fully vaccinated, it's safe to go outside without a mask under most circumstances, right? But if you're going to be in a big crowd of unknown people, you should probably put a mask on.
Then go for it. Then
right,
my point
absolutely.
is go for it. So
and my part of my hesitancy to say that this is over is whether or not it's safe to go out or to engage in whatever, go to the movies, go to a restaurant or whatever, depends not just on your personal behavior. It depends on where you live and how prevalent infection is in your area and what behavior you're engaging in, right? So where I work at a college, okay? And so people have classes that are 1 to 4 hours long. So if you've got an infected person sitting in the classroom shedding virus, with the Delta variant's loads being like 1,000 times or something what the wild virus was, over that number of hours, you might be able to accumulate enough particles to cause an infection in someone who's not vaccinated, who might be vaccinated, et cetera, because the nature of that particular behavior, that prolonged exposure might put you at greater risk that the general population wouldn't have. Because you're not sitting for 4 hours with a bunch of unknown people.
But what do we do about it? What do we do about it?
Well, personally, I don't think we should be back to live instruction until this coming spring. I think that we.
But look at the implications of homeschooling and virtual learning. Everyone from thousands of kids who are losing their opportunity to be educated to the deep psychological damage that this is happening. As I mentioned earlier, there's a holistic.
Where's the evidence of deep psychological damage?
Tons.
There's a lot of evidence. There's depression and
tons. There's implications for social distancing and for isolation. There are implications for slowing down the economy due to people being terrified that they're going to be infected by the Delta and drop dead. Yeah. So we can look at just the infection rate and its ramifications as an isolated thing. It's a societal issue.
I'm going to call this one. By October, November at the latest, a number of significant school districts will shut down to in-person instruction.
So what?
It's going to happen.
But what?
So if it's going to happen anyway, let's just do it and not let those kids get infected.
No. I mean, mask up. Wear N95s. If you're a parent, mask your child.
So let's see. Yeah, well, these kids, like I have a 4-year-old. Well, she's almost 5 now. Daughter, and it's sort of, I think her neurons have been rewired now to just wear a mask because she grew up during this thing. I mean, she came into consciousness pretty much during this pandemic, sort of. But it's like she cannot go into the elevator without wearing a mask. Like she needs to wear a mask. It's almost like second nature to her. So these kids are going to school and they're wearing masks, and it is having an effect. So, what is the rate of the percentage by which masks actually protect against infection? I think it's 50 to 70%.
It boils down to the type of mask that you wear. So there's tons of data. If you wear a cloth mask, 20% efficacy. If you wear a KN95 or an N95, it boosts it tremendously. So if you want to be personally responsible for yourself and your loved ones, and you're concerned about people who are unvaccinated, like our children, and if you want to maintain a semblance of a normalized society and you don't want deep psychological and economic damage to continue, N95 up and go for it. once again, the statistical implications of the disease versus the mitigation and the reaction to it need to be factored in. We can't shut schools down, or we shouldn't, unless there's a variant which is really vaccine resistant. We're at the point statistically, I think, where masks are sufficient mitigation. And it's a problem. There's going to be suffering. There's unfortunately going to be some fatalities, but we need to look at it in a broader context. We can't shut down. We can't go back unless there's additional data to substantiate the need for that.
We can shut down and we can go back. And that was the initial plan, right? So the initial plan for this was described as the hammer and the dance, which meant that you shut down, you mask, et cetera, to stop the spread. When the infection rates go low enough, you open back up. When they rise again, you close back down, you start mitigating, right? The problem is that everybody has COVID fatigue now, and they want it to be over, but that doesn't mean it is. So what I am saying is that I think by this coming spring, either everybody that is going to take the vaccine will have taken it, including the children, or have been infected with COVID and have some level of natural immunity. That's going to happen by the end of the fall, I think.
That's part of my point.
My target for opening back up is the spring, not now. We're almost at the finish line.
Yeah, but there's look, Ken, there's one thing that Spitz is talking about. Like I had, there are people who have their own businesses or their own small business. They're running their own thing. Like they're devastated. Many of them are devastated. Like a lot of them is just basically closed up shop. Like they're not getting help with their mortgages, with their rent. I mean, they're just not. I mean, the little bits that they get thrown at them from time to time is just not sustaining. I mean, a lot of us are. I think.
Sure. What does that have to do with whether the pandemic is over?
No, of course, yeah, you're right. But
But what begs the question, though, is how we deal with it locally.
Yeah, that's
Ken brought up the point about local infection rates and the variability of that. And
Absolutely.
This goes back, one second, I'll finish, into the notion of personal choice. So if there's a school system, okay, with a high rate of infection, I'm not going to say don't shut down. Go ahead and shut down. What I'm talking about is empowering individuals, local municipalities, and private and corporate businesses to make decisions about their constituents. And I will be the first to support the decisions that they make. The broader context is here. Should we have governmental mandates? Should we have broad lockdowns? Should we be as reactive as we were at the early onset of this pandemic when we had no vaccines? My answer is unequivocally no.
We didn't know that.
That's a straw man, Spitz. That's a straw man. Nobody's going to say we should do exactly what we did then. The data that's happening now dictates what we do. It's not, gosh, we need to go back to what we were doing in January. If the numbers are the same as they were in January. So let's say even with the what is it 60% of the population is vaccinated now. It's like we just crossed 70% of the eligible population. So let's say 65% of the total population of the states is vaccinated.
Yeah, 190 million, I think, is the total.
I thought it was 162 million. But anyway, go
okay.
ahead.
Whatever.
All right. So whatever it is. Okay. So if the rate of infection and death, even given that vaccination rate, returns to what it was at the peak, should we respond the way that we did at the peak? If right now that same level of suffering and death reoccurred, should we do what we did then? I'm not precluding it, is what I'm saying. I'm saying you let what's happening determine what you do to respond.
That's right. But the question, I think, is what is it that we do to respond, right? Like, I mean, it's specifically. So back then, you said, Spitz, back then we didn't. It's not just that we didn't have the vaccines, we didn't have anything else. We didn't really know anything about it. I mean, initially, remember they were telling us don't wear masks. if you don't have, they were telling us that, like, if you don't have the virus, don't wear a mask. They're out there to save the PPE for all the healthcare workers. And I don't know what effect that had.
Wash your groceries.
They were wiping down groceries, but not wearing masks when we were shopping for them, right? So then eventually they changed that, and then they started doing all the studies, and then we had that whole hydroxychloroquine thing, and then Trump was president, and all we know what happened.
And it actually kind of worked. I was a hydroxy fan.
So
except that it didn't work.
Yeah,
it did work. It did work.
Did you mean? I think he's talking about hydroxycontin. But
no. Just because Trump
he's talking about
hydroxychloroquine. I know.
All right. Yeah.
So ultimately, like we are armed with a lot more knowledge now too, as well as vaccines. So the way that we
vaccines.
Yeah. So the vaccines, and we know a lot more about it than we did before. So
and treatment.
Ken, the question is, what do you like specifically the way that we'd handle it? Like you're talking about the schools shutting down. Right before we just like, okay, we just got to shut down the schools. Now, mask wearing, social distancing, a lot of teachers have a handle on that, even in kindergartens and first grade. Like I know that from my kid too. They're doing testing, like regular testing. The testing isn't that thing that they stick in your brain. They scoop out your brain with like that back of that nasal swab.
There's saliva one now, right?
Yeah. Now, now they just rotate that thing in your nostrils and it tickles.
Kind of reminded me of college,
Yeah.
So
kids are, they can be regular. Like the testing results can, you can get them within hours. It's a lot of things are very different. So
everything's different.
Sure.
Everything.
And I recognize that. If I were calling the shots, if I were Emperor Ken and I got to call the shots, I would not open schools up until the vaccines were approved for school-age kids. Okay, I would make once the vaccines are available to that segment of kids, then I would open those grades up.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? I just want to say one thing too, and I'll speak for New York City. Okay, when you shut schools down, there are literally thousands of underprivileged children who do not eat lunch. I will just bring that up. Okay, there are working parents who can't go to work because they need to watch their kids or leave their kids at home. Once again, you make these bold statements about these societal decisions, even about shutting schools down, without thinking of the broader implications of doing so. So
no, I think about the broader implications.
Kids are being infected, and there's a problem, but there's ways to mitigate, and there's ways to locally nip it in the bud if we can. These broad stroke governmental solutions are going to shut the schools down until the vaccines are available. Doesn't jibe with the overall Freakonomics data of the damage that it does collectively and holistically to our children and to our economy. So it's not just a Republican talking point. There's a reality to this.
No,
there is. Be sensible about what we're doing at this point.
I agree with that, Ken, and I'll go to you next. But I do agree with that. Just having a kid and the in-person, them doing online school.
Let's go back to school.
It's actually been over the period of time. Like for a few months, it was fine. But and it's not just that, it interrupts work for people, but it's like these kids, it has taken a toll on my kid. Like I can see it. I can see that it's really rough. Like it's the isolation, especially I have an only child, right? I don't have any other, there's no other siblings or anything like that. So the isolation, everything, it really has taken a toll on them in a way that
I was an only child.
It's taken a toll on everyone.
No,
it's taken a toll on everyone.
That's right. But for the kids, Ken, the thing is that they're developing at this point, right? I mean, they're like 3, 4, 5-year-old kids are like their brains are developing. The way that this is going to have an impact on them that could be permanent. So anyway, that's just my own personal view on this. That's where I kind of align with Spitz. But you're saying that you don't want to see kids in ventilators. There is a point there that there are more and more kids showing up in hospitals and ICUs right now.
But can I ask one kind of question about personal decision? And unfortunately, a child who's surrounded by unvaccinated adults who are anti-science, likely ideologically motivated, and making all the wrong decisions is sad, okay? Because they have no will. They're stuck in that situation. But at some point, we need to make Darwinian decisions about moving forward as a society. And because the vaccines are available, and statistically,
the kids can't
you are
take
safer,
them.
okay?
The kids can't take them.
I got it. I'm saying that. I'm saying that. So whose job is it to protect them, and what actions should society and government specifically take to protect folks like the kids in areas where their parents and their voting constituents are pandemic fools, okay? Last I checked, we're in a democracy, and people make decisions about themselves and their family and their local government. And you and me and Ali think that a lot of these decisions are self-destructive and wrong, but they don't. And where is it our place to really mandate and do that?
Who is the they, though? Who is the they? Because there are many parents in those crazy, we're going to make it so you're not allowed to say that kids have to wear masks.
They can still wear masks.
Oh, absolutely. But they will be surrounded by people whose parents have forbid them from wearing masks.
You got to keep the kid home.
And if school is mandatory for those people who think that it's dangerous for their kids to go to school, then you have a problem there too. It's not just the kids whose parents are saying COVID's not real, go to school. It's the people that are saying I'm getting my kid vaccinated as soon as I'm allowed to, that are also being told you got to go to school with people who are saying, fuck you, I'm not making my kid wear a mask. And like the person, I can't remember what state it was, knowingly sent their COVID-infected kid to school.
All right.
This past week.
It's going to happen. It once again is like, you can mask your own child. There's implications, but what can we do about it?
To Ken's point, Spitz, when you're talking about the Delta variant, and you're talking about an R naught of 8, okay? And yeah, I saw this. I think you wrote something about this. You actually calculated, 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, and it goes on to. Like,
I did a thing with that.
So when you're dealing with something like that, and you have one kid with nut job parents, it's not the kid's fault, and the kid gets sent to school with COVID, the Delta variant, and R naught of 8, then. I mean, it's not. I know it's going to happen, but like that's a serious issue. That is a serious issue.
Yeah, that's why I think we have to figure out something that's going to effectively mitigate that. And one thing I'd like to say, in addition to the kids getting vaccinated once that's approved in either September or October, over the past 2 weeks, we've been seeing more and more employers that are mandating the vaccine. It's get vaccinated or you don't have a job kind of thing.
That's great.
And I'm all for it. I'm all for it. And that's going to start to push the vaccine numbers high enough that those kids will have some measure of protection, because they're going to be surrounded by adults who, like it or not, are going to be vaccinated.
But that's the road to the solution.
Right, but it just started, and it takes 6 weeks to get to fully vaccinated. And school is starting in some places already, and in some places within 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm saying hold off at least until October for in-person instruction, or at least give the option for remote instruction, and do it as a hybrid. So if you want to send your kids to school in person, send them in person. If you want to keep your kids at home, keep them at home. And so I don't think there's any additional harm in at least running with a hybrid model for one more semester. It's just We are so close to the goal. This isn't a time to fumble it.
We're getting to the goal one way or the other, and whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I'd like to get it with the few. I'd like to get there with the fewest dead kids.
I'm with you. I don't want kids to suffer. I got a kid. I got 2 kids. I don't want
they're old
them
enough
to
be
suffer
vaccinated.
either.
Why do you hate kids, Spitz? Why are you anti-kid?
Yeah.
Why do you hate America?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't hate America.
No.
I'm loving it. And part of America, and this is an important point too, in a broader context, is we've got this often idiotic cowboy mentality of don't tread on me and I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. Now, there are benefits to this, okay, for this attitude. It's the entrepreneurial spirit. One reason that we rock in the sciences and in the arts is because of this indefatigable spirit. And what we're seeing are the negative shadows of that individualism. Let's compare us to China with an authoritarian anvil of a state where on high they make a decision and 2 billion people comply, okay? Now, they've nipped this thing in the bud for as far as we know. If you look at the latest data from Johns Hopkins, there's like Zippo COVID over there.
But they also leaked it from the lab.
And
right?
they lie.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying, though, is there's a price to be paid for American individualism with this stupidity to it. And it's become idealized, right? It's become a political wedge issue.
You are right.
And in school districts where the superintendent on down to everybody refuses to act responsibly, I don't know what to tell them. I wish they would have some sense, but they don't. And my overall argument is, for the most part, go for it. Kill your own fucking children, okay? I feel bad for the kids, but what are we going to do about it?
But it's not just their own children.
I get it.
That's the thing. That's the whole crux of my argument why I say that it's not over. If this was just a personal decision, if this was smoking, right? You've got the information, you know it's bad for you to smoke. If you do it, okay. But it's not that. It's you make a personal decision and suddenly I'm on a ventilator. That's why this is fundamentally different.
So
and I would say that even though we don't want to be China in the way that we approach this, there are some things that we have agreed upon in our social contract that we are going to do collectively and not individually, right? Preamble to the Constitution, the reasons that we're instituting a government, one of them is promote the general welfare. The general welfare, not the individual's welfare, promote the general welfare. And so one of the mandates of our federal government, at least, and I would argue that this is implied, if not in the constitutions of states and localities, is to help the people in things that they can't do individually. And mitigating a pandemic is something that can't be done as an individual. There has to be a collective effort for that. And that's a part of our social contract.
Yeah.
I agree in principle, but in practice, it's just not the way it is.
Yeah. Okay.
It just isn't.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to let's move on from here. I just want to say, here, Bohud Rashid is saying that Mookie and Ken are making good arguments, but I'm leaning more towards Ken. So you've got him. This is like the scoreboard. And then unlike
Mookie, he likes children.
Yeah, he's not anti-kid. What would that be? Pedophobic? Pedophobe.
That's right. There's a woman on TikTok who facetiously made a bunch of T-shirts, and one of them says, "Fuck them kids."
This is and Abdullah saying, "Well said, Mookie." So I guess there's a thing I don't want to. Well, I guess we are going to both sides this. So another question from Tracy Dunlop. She's saying, should we abandon those who are unfortunate enough to live in the red-pilled area? So just to make that broader, right? There is now a it's kind of funny because like there's a lot of the people who live in these sort of red states and the conservative states who don't want to get vaccinated, don't want to wear masks, and they're coming out saying they're like, I'm not going to be a guinea pig in this experiment, but they're already part of the control group, so they're already part of the experiment right now.
Absolutely.
So,
and
what
almost
do you do?
All the arguments that they're making are bullshit. Because they break down if you actually look at the data.
We don't even
have to go there. Guys, we're all in agreement about the public health issues and the data. The question is how we react to it and what kind of governmental intervention or mandates should happen to mitigate these challenges.
So
and I'm a little bit more laissez-faire. I'm taking a more libertarian point of view, and I'm simply acknowledging the difficulty that we're experiencing in a polarized, fragmented society that generally shuns science and has gotten to this horrible state. So we can talk about improving education. We can talk about all that great shit. But I'm just a realist here.
We're talking short term, Spitz. So like, what are you doing? These people who don't want to get vaccinated, don't want to wear masks, but are going around everywhere. Now it is, there are some states, huh?
That's
the question. What do you do? Do you if they're just not doing it, Ken, what do you think? Like, what do you do with people like that? Do the rest of us who did go out, who did wipe down our groceries and wore our masks and did the social distancing, got our vaccines, did the whole thing, do the rest of us just say, okay, now we're going to have to wear masks because of these motherfuckers? Like, we're just doing whatever they want to do?
Well, and my answer depends. Again, it depends on the data on the ground.
Sorry, I want to say one thing. Like, if the answer is yes, if the answer is that the rest of us have to make further concessions to accommodate these people, right? Then how do you convince people to do that? That's gonna be a really hard, thing to get people to do.
Right, and you might not be able to. But we've already said though. Mm-hmm. That this ball is already rolling. I personally think that within the next few months, just with the increasing number of employers who are saying that vaccines are mandatory, the Supreme Court just upheld, I forget what college it is. It's somewhere in the Midwest that they sued because they didn't want to have to take the vaccine to go back to college. And the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to stop them. You got to get vaccinated or go to another school. As that becomes more prevalent, if the Supreme Court continues to uphold those vaccine mandates, we're going to get ourselves out of this just with that stuff. Just with schools and employers doing it, right? But that's still going to take through the fall to get us to where we need to be.
That's just
so what I say in answer to these questions will probably be radically different in the spring. Okay.
Yeah, but
so again,
Emperor
Ken, this spring, if we need to get to 90% vax rate, or we're all going to die because we keep getting 100% vaccine escape variants. And somebody said, okay, Ken, are you for forced vaccination? I'd say, yeah.
Yeah.
I can grab people and do it.
Ken, these are hypotheticals. We're living in the now. Could there be a Omega? But
I've already said what I would do now. I've already said what I would do now.
I get it, but there could be an Omega variant tomorrow.
Well, there's apparently
whatever.
Delta Plus. Have you heard of the Delta Plus? There's a Delta Plus,
I have,
the Delta Supreme.
But the Delta Plus though isn't as bad as Delta. I thought it was like I forget what they said the mutation was, that it was potentially more spreadable, but it wasn't. It didn't make you sick or something.
Yeah, but we could talk all day about variants and mutations. It's just a part of biology and quantum mechanics.
Absolutely.
So, but that's not the point.
Which means we got to get to the fall. The point is get to the fall.
The point though is like, if you don't get vaccinated, you're gonna die, and then that way you can't infect people, or you're gonna get infected and you get natural immunity through the infection. Okay, so don't get vaccinated. Do your thing.
And right. And so the danger posed to those of us who did get vaccinated or those of us who can't get vaccinated will be much lower, in my opinion, after the fall than it is right now. Either because Delta burns through everybody, or we get the vax rate higher. And so my thing is, I want as many people as possible to live through the fall.
Yeah.
When we actually get to the end of this.
I hate people. I want more people to die.
Well, okay, there you go. So Abdullah's saying, haha. He's saying you said don't get vaccinated and die. That's harsh. It is harsh, but what do you do?
What else to tell you, man?
What do you do? Like, it's
no. I have no sympathy for as Spitz, if you've been seeing the stuff that I've been posting on Facebook, I have been kind of delighting in posting all of the stories of the prominent anti-vaxxers. I'm never going to take your fucking vaccine. It doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. And then they die of COVID. Every single one of those articles I see, I post. And I have a little bit of a fuck you in my mind when I post it, because being like vaccine hesitant or saying, a lot of black people in this country don't want to get it because they say Tuskegee experiment. I don't trust what the government is saying. Fine. I'm not necessarily talking about those people, but they're going to suffer consequences too. I'm talking about the people who actively spread disinformation, that say stuff that they know isn't true, or buy into conspiracy theories that wouldn't survive 2 questions. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. When those people catch COVID and die, I do not feel sorry for them. That's like someone I know had a personal connection to Herman Cain. And when he died, I was like, screw him. I knew him, but I was like, no, he was spreading disinformation
here, though.
Guys,
go for 1 second. A friend of a friend was 38 years old and was anti-vax, and she died. And it's sad and it's tragic. There are a lot of people who are being deluded by the misinformation, okay? And there's a lot of people who are suffering and dying needlessly. So we shouldn't denigrate them. It's disrespectful, and there are big problems here. So this cavalier attitude, and I'm being hyperbolic, if you don't take the vaccine, drop dead. There's a little mishugas in that, but at the same time, I do feel for people who are succumbing to the propaganda. But you brought up a great point earlier.
Like I said, I wasn't talking about them.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying that this is a problem. We need to acknowledge it, but in the bigger picture of things, what can we do about it? And sadly, not much.
So from the libertarian, you're coming from a libertarian perspective, right? So Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? He came out recently, and he did that. There was that clip.
He called him a schmuck. You're a schmuck if you don't get vaccinated.
And he said, "Screw your freedom" on TV. So he said, "Screw your freedom." This is a Republican guy, Republican governor of California, and so that's what he's saying. Now he's written a whole article as of today in the Atlantic, where he's saying, "Don't be a schmuck. Put on a mask." He's saying generations of Americans made incredible sacrifices, and we're going to throw fits about putting a mask over our mouth and nose. He's basically making the point that when you have rights, people say it's my right, and he's like, those rights come with responsibilities. So I will. I was gonna read this part of it, but I can't find it right now. But yeah, you know what I mean. So that's what he's saying. So here's the. So this is what I want to ask you, Mookie. What do you do? So let's just talk about vaccine mandates and mask mandates. Is that something that you think should happen? Ideally, how would you justify it if you do? And if you do think that, do you think it's possible to do it at a practical scale in the U.S. the way it is right now?
I just think the way the U.S. right now is in terms of polarization and fragmentation. It's mandating vaccines could have a whiplash effect. And the same thing with even mask mandates. I think a much more practical, utilitarian, and effective approach is what Ken was mentioning earlier, which is the hashtag Fomo Effect, okay? I can't go to a show. I can't go to the diner, I can't fly on an airplane unless I show my vax card. Okay.
Vaccine passports.
That has not even a passport. It could even be informal, but efforts other countries have made in terms of these kind of individualized mandates from private businesses have been proven effective, and I think they'll be effective now. Now the American the American airlines, right, are bifurcating in terms of airlines that demand those to be vaccinated and those don't. So that sense of freedom, introducing opportunity and introducing opportunity costs for not being vaccinated on an individual, company, corporate, and municipal level, I think is the way to go. And once again, it reinforces this idea of being a democracy. And unfortunately, to the question that was brought up earlier, I'm in a red state, I'm stuck, I'm surrounded by infection, I don't believe that what they're doing is right. I feel for you. You're kind of fucked. But in the broader picture of things, if we empower local government, local business, and also national corporations to make these decisions, yay or nay, we're going to reach the point of FOMOing a lot more people into making better decisions about health and public health. And I think that's the answer. Having a sweeping governmental mandate, enforcing this in an unenforceable kind of way in today's political climate will probably do more harm than good. We're not France. We're not France, and we're certainly not China. And there, once again, I just want to bring up again, there are implications for a certain type of freedom and a certain type of American cavalier attitude. There are benefits to it in certain contexts. In this context, we're blowing it and we suck, but it's just where we are. It's how we are as a society. And I think empowering private businesses with these decisions and local municipalities is the way to go.
Right, but governments have a role, even if they're local governments. And one of the examples that comes to mind is there are Republican governors and Republican legislatures who have passed laws saying that individual towns are not allowed to pass mask mandates. They have said you're barred from having mask mandates. And in 2 different states, I think, in the past 2 weeks, a judge has said, no, you can't bar them from doing that. And so I think the government still has a role to play, because the state governments, in some cases, for purely political reasons, there is absolutely no reason other than politics to say that a local community or a business can't mandate masks. Well, they are taking the ability at the local level away from the local decision makers.
I'm with you. So, I don't agree.
I just wanted to ask about this. We've got a question here. This is Tracy, she's clarifying her previous question, saying, I meant those who want the shot but live in areas where the governor is against it. Is this something?
They can still get it.
Yeah, they can still get it, right? That's what I'm saying.
And you could still wear a mask in areas where mandated mask policy is ostensibly illegal. You could still wear a mask.
Just, in some places, you'll get harassed.
Classic example of this. Okay.
Yeah, in some places you'll get harassed. I've read stories of people putting on disguises to go get vaccinated so that their family and friends won't know that they did it.
Why don't they just have MAGA masks, like red MAGA masks, and then you solve the problem?
And why this goes back to what we were talking about at one point earlier. Why don't the GOP folks call it the Trump shot?
They started doing that.
He's the one who
started doing it.
It was the Trump
started doing it.
Yeah, and then Trump just said that he's not going to defend vaccinations because he doesn't want to give a benefit to Biden. He just said that, I think, today. So he's willing to kill his own constituents, not to be a benefit.
That's not a surprise. I don't even think we need to go there. Of course he's willing to go. Yeah, he is. I mean, you're right about that. What are you going to do? Okay, so I haven't read. So Shannon Stater, Tina saying all these parents that are unwilling to mask their kids to get them back on campus and to in-person teaching are going to burn us before the companies mandating vaccines will be able to save it, or vaccinated FOMO. Look at the South right now.
Yeah, that's been my whole point. That's why I think we need through the fall to get ahead of this, because of stuff like that. That'll be heavily mitigated if we give a little bit of extra time for those private sector mandates and to get those kids vaccinated. And I will say too, and I don't know how this is going to go over, but back when I was a kid, I don't think anybody needed parental permission to vaccinate kids in school. I remember getting, I think it was the smallpox vaccine when I was in kindergarten. I didn't even know what was happening.
No, but
they
it's
lined
still
us
the
all up.
case, Ken.
I stepped into
case.
a room. They stuck a needle in my arm, and I'm like, oh, what was that?
Yeah, my kid is going to college, and they just gave the battery of vaccinations that he needs to have to be able to go to his dorm, meningitis, what have you. And the COVID vaccine was included in that. So, hi, Shannon. I think your point is a good one. All I'm saying is, how are we going to force your school system to comply if they themselves are unwilling to do so in Orange County? So this is part of the dilemma, which is how much government control should be enforced to be responsible in a public health crisis. And
I think it depends on the situation, and you might not need government control, because in some cases, you're going to have teachers who are going to say, I'm not going back in the classroom unless you're vaccinating
then go for
it. Testing.
Then go for it.
Right.
That begs the question of the approach, which is, again, I'm saying personal choice, personal responsibility, and the limits of government on the federal level. That's just what we're dealing with.
Oh, sure, sure, and that's going to happen. So another thing you can do is, if you have a teacher that doesn't want to get vaxxed, if it's not mandatory, but in California, I think they just said it's mandatory for all teachers in California.
And Chicago public school system just the other day mandated vaccinations for teachers. The Chicago public school system just did.
And so if you had a place that had an unvaxxed teacher, or a teacher that's willing, you could separate the unvaxxed from the vaxxed kids. I'm not going to wear a mask, I'm not going to get vaxxed. You can have them all together in their classroom, and the vaxxed mask wearing kids in another classroom. Then again, that's another set of personal choices. They're still getting educated. It's just
that's all I'm saying. So, I don't hate kids. I don't want people to die. I'm just looking at the inevitability of the American landscape and saying, let's make the most of this and let's keep driving forward and not freak the fuck out. That's all I'm saying.
I want to talk, like, because we've got another 30 minutes. Okay, it's cool. I wanted to talk about the anti-vaxxer thing, because the thing is, a lot of people who are resisting this vaccine and who are vaccine hesitant are actually, surprisingly, they're educated people. Some of them are even medical professionals. I'm telling you, there are medical professionals who don't want to take the vaccine.
And there's several reasons. Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Well, I think he is vaccinated. Isn't he vaccinated?
Yeah, but he's churning out all this bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing, I got to say one thing about Joe Rogan is that he will like, he does walk his stuff back.
Yeah,
like,
Bill Burr called him out. Bill Burr said, no.
Well, Bill Burr is a fucking genius. But, I mean, he just generally is. He's one of my favorite people nowadays. But anyway, look, so there are a lot of smart people and educated people who should know better, who are not doing it. And there's several reasons for that. Okay, there's, one of them is that this is the first time that any vaccine's been approved or emergency use authorization in such a short time. It's the fastest anything's been approved, and it's not really approved. And EUA is a very sort of new thing. It's never really properly been used at such a mass scale, or I think at all.
No, it has been before.
Yeah, but not. Yeah, so I guess not at such a mass scale. The technology, the mRNA technology, is completely new. Yeah, so this is something that
the technology is 10 or 20 years old.
No, you're right. The technology is old, but it's like the internet,
it's never
right?
Been implemented on this scale.
Yeah,
correct.
Before. So it's like the internet. The internet was invented in the 1960s, but none of us really it didn't really go viral until the 90s. So the same thing with this mRNA technology. So new technology, really fast approval. And then on top of that, it was politicized. Right. So there was this whole, it was super politicized.
But push aside the political, though. So those people that don't want to take the mRNA because it was developed too fast, even though I don't think that argument holds water personally.
It's stupid.
But let's say that's true. Take one of the non-mRNA vaccines. Those are available too. Why don't they take those?
Yeah, they are. So I have it. There's a question here.
That are dangerous. The J&J one caused the thrombosis.
Yeah,
there are three deaths from vaccines, I guess, that are confirmed by the vaccine adverse event reporting system, and they're all J&J. I don't think there are any from Pfizer and
and the blood clots were literally 1 in a million.
They were, and then they started increasing, and the problem is anything that, even if it's 1 in a million, even if it's like you talked about the breakthrough infections, even 0.02 or 0.29%, it shows up as 500,000 people because you have 160 million people are vaccinated. So this is so it becomes like there is an illusion, and when you're talking about trying to get the public comfortable with vaccines and fighting a vaccine hesitancy, those illusions matter. Like the absolute numbers matter a lot more than percentages. So here's so Hasnain Shabir is asking this question, and I'm going to read this and one more that's related to this, and this is about educated people who are out there showing this hesitancy. So he's saying, what is the difference between a typical vaccine development cycle versus a fast track developed vaccine and the potential risk it may pose to longer term time dependent health impacts? So there's a whole idea that, these vaccines are approved under emergency use authorization.
But can I bring up one quick point, which is the big erroneous factor here? The reason that vaccine development takes like 10 years is because within the clinical trials, you need to wait for your test subjects to be naturally infected by the contagion. Okay. So if you have a clinical trial with, let's say, 20,000 people and it's for measles or whatever, then you need to wait for them to be infected. And then you study the impact, right? Control test subject. During a global pandemic, because of the prevalence of the infection rate, everything was accelerated. They had, test subjects which were more numerous than any other clinical trial.
Yeah, volunteers for the trials.
So people are getting infected faster. And when people say that I don't trust these new vaccines because they were developed so quickly, they're ignorant of the way clinical trials are designed and executed.
Correct.
And they're also ignorant of the efforts that were made early on to parallel process and actually start developing and manufacturing vaccines which were not yet tested and approved.
Right.
So
they don't
billions were spent on the upfront in terms of research development, but also manufacturing in a void of pre-approval that's never been done, coupled with the fact that we're in the middle of a global pandemic where your test subjects are naturally being infected at a much more rapid rate than if you're not in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So it's just wrong. People don't understand the science.
And can I add something to that, Spitz? Can I add something to that?
Go ahead.
That people don't seem to understand about that parallel development. So usually you get each stage of the vaccines, development and deployment funded. But when they did it in parallel, one of the things that isn't clear necessarily in the statement that you made is if they develop a vaccine, we threw a ton of money at this. So we started developing the vaccines knowing that even after we put all of that money into it, if it showed in the trial that it wasn't effective, we were just going to throw it away. We're going to throw it away, and nobody other than the test subjects was ever going to get that. And it didn't matter because it was an unlimited money supply because everybody in the world was throwing money at trying to find this.
Thanks, Donald. Thanks, Donald J. Trump.
Going on this same thread of like people who are educated, not only being skeptical of these vaccines. I mean, I know they're friends, actual friends that I have are very educated. They think that it's going to change your DNA. That like if the mRNA vaccine is going to change your DNA, and I always think, I'm like, yeah, well, if it is going to change your DNA, you might just benefit from it. You could probably use some different DNA. But in addition to that, there are people. There are also this is people spreading disinformation. And this is, for example, someone like Brett Weinstein, right? He's got a very popular podcast, evolutionary biologist. His wife is, I think, also an evolutionary biologist. And they sit there and, they've been on Bill Maher. They've gone around talking everywhere. And they are extremely, some of the stuff they're saying is, so this is a question related to that. Mars Chung. Hey, Mars, how's it going? He's saying, what does the spread of the idea of hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin as treatments say about our ability to trust our science communicators? COVID aside, what does it say about our ability to handle climate change? So I mean that's a separate thing. But it's I think that's a really good question.
People like conspiracies more than they like fact.
Huh?
People like conspiracies more than they like fact. The conspiracy theories are intriguing and simple and digestible, right? If you say there's this shadowy conspiracy of people who are trying to manipulate you and get you under their control, you say, God, I knew it. I knew there was something going on. I'm glad you told me, and I'm one of the people that's in the know. But understanding the mechanism by which an mRNA vaccine is delivered, and the fact that they have engineered it so that it can't get into the nucleus of the cell where the DNA is, takes a lot more to actually understand why it's safe.
That's right. But there's also another thing. I mean, it's not just, you have the conspiracy theories and you got the QAnon people, and that's all true. But like, we're talking about like Brett Weinstein coming out and talking about ivermectin, and he's talking like these aren't just conspiracy theories. These are actual.
Some of the people that are pushing that stuff though have a monetary interest.
Like this guy Robert Malone. Apparently,
some of this is okay. Okay, I'll take another contrarian point of view, which is maybe there is risk we don't know about.
Right.
Okay?
That could very well be.
So that's all I'm saying. So, Brett Weinstein says a lot of bullshit, but he's also brilliant in other ways. Okay. The two brothers are amazing, but they're also amazingly annoying. All right. Okay. So, but all I'm saying is that the price you pay and the benefit of a free, diverse, dynamic society is an open exchange of ideas, many of them crazy, many of them not. And, but to have some kind of dialogue about the risk of these things and to second guess ourselves is actually okay. The problem is when the misinformation becomes dominant, it clouds everyone's thinking, and the definition of truth is it doesn't exist anymore. There are no facts.
And that's
a problem. But I just want to say it's good to have a skepticism. Maybe there is some problem.
Absolutely.
There's a skepticism. Like there's the thing with skepticism is that, you have the skeptics who do respect Occam's razor, for instance. And then you have the other skeptics who are just like, hey, we're just asking questions. Are we just asking questions? And they're just looking for alternative explanations to things.
But the solution is education. You can't censor. Okay, YouTube just took Rand Paul off the internet.
These are educated people. Rand Paul is a physician.
I get it.
Brett Weinstein is an evolutionary biologist.
I know, but that's my point.
This Robert Malone guy,
that's
right?
my point.
Let
them froth at the mouth.
Right,
Robert Malone genuinely did some of that.
But that's why there is scientific consensus, though. 96% of the doctors in the country are vaccinated. 96%. Of the doctors in the country are vaccinated. So that leaves 4% that, for whatever reason, didn't take the vaccine. Okay. The consensus is in.
Yeah,
the consensus is in.
And again, I just want to say the consensus doesn't make it true. In this case, I agree with it, and it has evidence-based implications for helping society. But scientists believed in phlogiston, and now they believe in string theory, and both are bullshit. Okay, that hold back the development of science for generations. So talk to a physicist. 96% of physicists love string theory, okay? And it's wrong.
But the thing is
a whole other episode.
Consensus still exists, and that's the way science works. You find a model that better explains the world than the model that you had before.
But for the sake
and then
of us
somebody
and our
else comes
listeners,
along and says, no,
what-
that model was bullshit too. This one's even better.
Well, what are
Throw
we
that
going to
shit
do
away.
about it?
That's how science works, though.
Yeah.
Science
Okay,
is not
but
religion.
what's the implication?
It's not.
And-
It's not somebody saying, mRNA vaccines are a savior that will be immutable forever, and there will never be anything proven to be wrong with mRNA. That's not how it works.
Guys, listen. It's not about whether these claims are true. I mean, we know that. Okay, we know that. Like, even if ivermectin, it doesn't have any, like, it hasn't really been shown to do all that much.
Hydroxy works. It helped. Hydroxychloroquine was actually helpful.
Yeah, it was
helpful anecdotally. None of the studies said it
there's
helped.
data.
Ultimately, Spitz, it didn't.
It did.
Ultimately, it didn't.
The data says it did not.
It did.
Yes, he's saying.
It did.
But here, listen, guys, hold on, just 1 second. Okay, so you have these treatments. That the point isn't that we know whether these treatments work or not. A lot of them, I mean, they don't. Even if they did, even if ivermectin did, it's so rare. It's really hard to get hold of. So it's not the kind of thing that you can really. I mean, that there's going to be an ivermectin rollout, like, based on what evidence? The question is this. The question is,
yes, finally.
Like, I'm the one who's talking the most here. Okay. Yeah. Now I forgot the question. No, the question is, what do we do?
Screaming, shut up at you.
These people, like, what do we do about people like Robert Malone, who actually did? He claims to have invented the mRNA vaccine technology, and he actually, when he was a grad student, like some of the earliest papers on this technology, or like the precursors to this technology, were him. He was a co-author on those. So he has been on this, and he is one of the people who's spreading a lot of this crap about.
What are you going to do? You can't do anything.
Yeah. That's the question. What are you going to do? What do you do?
It depends. So first of all, I will say, another one of the same immunologists. I follow a couple of immunologists, a bunch of medical doctors, a bunch of nurses, and a couple of virologists who talk about this stuff all the time. And they talked about that guy specifically, right? Yeah. So if it's the guy that I think you're talking about, he's the guy that was one of the inventors of the mRNA technology, not a developer of the mRNA vaccine.
Yes, that's right.
Right. And so the immunologist did a talk on this, and they were saying, okay, yes, he helped develop the technology, but he doesn't understand how the vaccine was developed, and this is how the vaccine functions apart from that. So I get what you're saying, but if you have people who have honest medical skepticism, right? I don't think there's anything you can do about that. But people who are willfully spreading disinformation that they know to be true that causes people harm, there is a remedy for that, right?
What is that? What is that remedy?
Platforming.
If it causes people harm, it could be reckless endangerment.
But this goes into the social media censorship, free speech clusterfuck of an issue.
Speech, but none speech or any of the other rights in the Bill of Rights. None of them are absolute, though.
Yeah,
there are limitations on all of them, and the classic one is that you're allowed to say what you want, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater when there's no fire.
But
because
this is
it endangers people.
We're going way tangential
we are.
here.
We're going tangential.
It's not. That's why I'm saying. But what I'm saying with that is that a person who is knowingly spreading disinformation about the vaccines for whatever reason, for financial gain, for political gain, or for whatever, is different than a person who has a different of opinion on the interpretation of the science.
Okay,
those are the two things.
I want to clarify.
Where are we headed here? Where do we want to land with this conversation?
Okay, wait.
Where are we going?
I want to just clarify one thing. You were talking about the fire in the crowded theater. Like, this isn't Twitter taking Rand Paul off of Twitter. Twitter taking Rand Paul
YouTube.
Off YouTube or where?
Yeah.
Okay, so he gets pulled off of YouTube or whatever. I mean, these are not things. These are private corporations deplatforming people. These are like, it's sort of the equivalent of TV corporations or other traditional broadcast corporations saying
Scarlett
that
Johansson got canceled.
Yeah, we don't want to platform this person, that person. That the cancel culture is an issue. I think that's a problem. But this is not a free speech issue because the government's not involved at all, right? It's just not.
But that's what I'm getting at. Where are we going with this conversation?
Okay. So, I mean, I just wanted to know what you guys thought about all the misinformation.
I think a place that we're going to end up is just like My Pillow. Mike Lindell, is that his name?
My Pillow guy.
Yeah. My Pillow guy.
He's my favorite Trumper.
In the middle of his 72-hour symposium of bullshit, got the call that the multi-billion-dollar defamation lawsuit against him and his cohorts was going to be allowed to go forward, and he lost his shit on stage, right? Because he had defamed the voting machine company. And in that same way, if somebody is relying on information from someone who is actively spreading disinformation and they get COVID and they have to be hospitalized and they've got a $200,000 hospital bill, people are going to start suing over that kind of stuff. I don't know whether they will be successful, but if anyone is, a lot of that shit's going to dry up because right now, spreading disinformation has almost no consequences. You might get deplatformed, but you're not going to lose $500,000. You're not going to get sent to jail. And depending on how people decide to respond to that active kind of disinformation, that might change.
Yeah.
Well, bravo. Okay. So lawyers, let's give a round of applause to lawyers.
That's what we got to do. Yeah, Shannon Stater, Tina saying, if only ivermectin took care of brain worms. I love that comment. That's fantastic. So, okay, so we've got like, I don't know, 8-9 minutes right now. Closing statements. So speaking of lawyers, like just Spitz, is there anything that Ken said today that made you think differently about your position?
Yeah, it heightened my sensitivity to some of the suffering, especially on the part of children. I have 2 kids. I don't want them harmed. I got them both vaccinated as soon as the vaccines were eligible for them. They're 14 and 18. There's a tremendous amount of suffering throughout the country. It is needless suffering because of our own ignorance, stupidity, and arrogance. So if we followed the science, if per Ken's point, we all just did the responsible thing, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. However, and just like Prof G likes to say, however, there's also the reality of a country and a zeitgeist in the United States of this don't tread on me individualism. And because of the polarization we have ideologically and even culturally, and because of the overall situation we're in, we simply have to deal with the fact that a lot of people don't believe in the science. They're using it as a wedge issue, and they're creating all these problems. And given the reality of what's going on the ground, I just think that we need to just continue on forward. We need to trust the science. We need to be vigilant about the data. But a lot of the hysteria and a lot of the reaction to the reaction can often do more harm than good. So when Ken brought up the notion that the Delta was on the way, it's not like I didn't believe him. I denigrated it, as I am in a sense now, simply for the fact that, at least according to the data as I see it, we're going to peak. We're just at the peak in a lot of the high areas. The Delta is going to start sweeping north and east, and we're going to have issues even in New York, where I live. I accept that. I understand that. But the overall risk is still relatively low. The outlook is excellent. And I think, I'm going to say it again, we conquered this mofo with the science. And we have a few stumbles along the way, but we see not only the light at the end of the tunnel, but most of us who are responsible, who believe in the science and are acting accordingly, are living as if the pandemic is more or less all over. So, that's my.
I think a lot of people are. Ken, what do you think? Is there anything Spitz said that kind of made you rethink your position, or you're holding on to it?
I like to say this first: Spitz, you ignorant slut.
At least half of it is accurate.
He's not ignorant. Okay.
So I think his point is well taken about the effect on the economy, and I get that. And through this entire thing, one of the things that I have acknowledged about myself is that I'm one of the privileged people. I have a job that allowed me to work from home for almost 2 years now. And so I haven't had to miss a step. I haven't lost, $1 of income because of this thing. And there's going to be people who are in much less fortunate financial situations than myself who are getting broken financially by the pandemic. And maybe I need to consider that more in the options that I'm willing to back. I will concede that. I will say at the same time that those have to be peripheral considerations, because one of the reasons why I won't say this thing is over, and why I continually post COVID information on my Facebook page and that kind of stuff, is because there might be someone out there who is vaccine hesitant, who decides, because of something, one of the arguments that I post, decides to go get vaccinated, or convinces their parent to do it, or they get their kid vaccinated sooner than they were planning to, and that could save somebody. Similarly, if that kind of information spreads, then people in those red states where COVID denial is prevalent, it might prompt somebody to say, you know what, I think this thing might be real. Maybe I'm going to put on one of those fake mustaches and go get the shot and not tell anybody. Whatever it is, acknowledging that it's not over yet and that it's real, I think can save some people who can be saved. And that's my whole point with the stuff. I have no vested interest in being right about it. I honestly hope that Spitz is right. I hope that it's over and that none of the dire things that I think are probably going to happen. And I couldn't be any happier to be proven wrong in that instance, and everybody comes out of this thing alive and well. That's not how I think it's going to go down, but I will be happy to say, Spitz, damn it, you were right, and I'm glad you were, if it turns out that way.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I said gentlemen.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah. This was a blast.
The lesson here is use the mute button, buddy.
Huh? Yeah.
Use the mute button.
No. Why would I? This was amazing. I'm not that kind of no.
I'm empowering you. It's personal choice.
No, that's cool. Yeah. No, this was a lot of fun. So stay tuned for our next podcast, which is going to be about why string theory is bullshit and all those. The majority of physicists are wrong, and
they are.
Yeah. So yeah, that's Spitz theory. But yeah, thank you. So I think we did cover a lot of stuff here. So we'll see what happens. It'd be great to have you guys back and just do this just because of fun.
Yeah,
this whole thing
in 6 months, we'll see. How's the nation? How's the world? Has the Omega variant hit? Right. In which case I'd be like, holy shit, back to square one. Or is it just woo? We're all flying.
I'm hoping we nip it before that happens. I'm hoping the immunologist I follow who says there's gonna be a variant with 100% vaccine escape. I hope we get a handle on this before she's proven right.
Yeah,
I really.
But it's gonna the thing is, despite the vaccine, this thing is here to stay. It's not like
every year
you're not gonna get
you're gonna have to get a COVID shot every year.
We're not gonna. It's not like the pandemic will be over. COVID's here to stay. It's gonna be like just like you get the flu shot every year, you're gonna get the COVID 100%. Shot every year. You're gonna have to.
Yeah.
So that's just something that we're all gonna live with. But anyway,
and thanks to everyone for watching.
Yeah, everybody, thanks for your questions. Thanks for the involvement. And this is great. This is going to be up. If you're watching this live, the audio version of this will be on iTunes, Spotify, blah, 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 blah. All of these things. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and the bell, like smash the subscribed up.
You
and
should sell
assault the bell.
swag. Why don't you sell swag?
Yeah, listen, I'm just getting this. I'm not very good at this, so I'm just getting the handle of it. But anyway, so yeah, the audio version of this will be out tomorrow. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Really, really appreciate it, guys. Stick around for just a bit.
Okay.